an AppleVis original.
Hello there, and welcome to the AppleVis Extra podcast. David Nason here, delighted to be with you for another episode. On today's podcast, really excited to be joined by a developer called Ashley Cox. This is the first in a mini-series of podcasts we're doing to showcase blind and low vision developers. So people from within our community who are developing apps. There's a lot of good stuff going on at the moment in that space, and we thought it would be good fun to showcase them. So Ashley is the developer of an app called Simulcast, which is a podcast app and also does radio and music and things like that as well. So it's a really cool app. It is not yet out, but it is available in test flight as a beta, and you can check that out on applevis.com and get all the details there, and it will be in the App Store later in the year. Ashley's also got a lot of experience of developing and coding and has various other projects in the works too. So it's a really interesting chat. Really excited to get into it. So without further ado, let's get into the chat with Ashley. Ashley, thanks for joining me on the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted. And yeah, I suppose I asked you on because I know you're active in developing apps and that kind of thing, and you're a member of the community yourself. So yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit first about yourself, about your background?
Yeah, so my background is, college dropout, software developer. I've been into computers for many years. I got my first computer in the early 2000s, and I kind of got bitten by the bug, I guess. A good friend of mine at the time taught me basic web development. Obviously started out with HTML like everybody does, and sort of back in the early 2000s, the sort of web 2.0 era hadn't really hit. So, it was a lot simpler to create sort of your basic website back then. So he taught me the basics of web development, HTML, CSS, PHP, all that kind of thing. And I got quite heavily into that. And then sort of, moving on from that, I started learning sort of different languages. I was a Windows user sort of back in those days. So it would have been things like Python, a little bit of Visual Basic, that kind of thing. And then, it kind of just moved on from there. I sort of took a break from it for a while I was sort of going up through school and into college, and did a little bit on the side, but not much. And then left college and kind of just took it up as a career, mainly because I was struggling to find employment, as many in the community do, and it was just something I could do, and it was something I could get paid for, so I did it. And then sort of a few years later, I ended up going down a different career path, mainly because I just found software development full-time to be quite a lonely profession. So I needed a change. So I went down a different career path, but I've always sort of kept my hand in and done it as a hobby and done it sort of semi-professionally on the side. And I think sort of more than ever, really, I'm coming up with ideas and finding solutions that or problems that need solutions, and why not make those solutions? So a lot of the apps I create are created because I either can't find an app to fulfill a particular need, or because the apps that are currently out there are lacking in some kind of feature, and I feel like I could sort of bring something to the table. So that's kind of me, really.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Oh yeah. I did the HTML CSS bit and never got any further. So It's one of those. I'm one of those people who always says I'd love to learn to code, but I've never actually done it. So fair play for
Yeah.
sticking to and yeah,
The
learning
thing
it.
is, it's changed so much over the years. I mean, it used to be so simple, really, and like creating your basic website. You could do a lot with very basic markup language.
Mm.
Whereas now, especially if you're kind of wanting to be competitive, there's just so much almost that you've got to be on top of. Everything's based on a framework these days, or obviously we've got all these Web 2.0 technologies, JavaScript, etc., and people expect a certain style and a certain level of complexity in even the simplest website or app. So it's kind of funny, really, because there's more resources than ever for people getting into coding or people getting back into coding, but it's in some ways harder than ever because the projects that we're creating are more complex than ever. And of course, there's so much out there now in terms of apps as well. It's such a crowded
Yeah.
landscape that coming up with original ideas and coming up with issues that actually need solving, is more difficult.
Yeah, and the economics of it are massively changed in the last 20 years as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And the way we distribute apps and the fact that we don't own anything anymore, and it's crazy, really. And of course, AI as well. The fact that anybody can make an app doesn't necessarily mean it's a good app, but anyone can make an app.
Yeah, this is true. And like you said, your friend helped you get started learning the early pieces of HTML. After that, like what kind of resources would you have used to learn languages?
Mainly online, to be honest. I was mostly self-taught. I was never one to sort of learn, like go super in depth and learn a programming language and sort of specialize in that language. I sort of just learnt what I needed to for a particular task, and through that knowledge grew. It was I just became more proficient as I went along. I think it really helped that I kind of had no kind of pressure because it was only ever personal projects in those early days, or it was like a quick and dirty piece of software to achieve a certain task. So there was no pressure to make great stuff. It was just make something that works. So there's a lot of space to learn.
I suppose there's a bit of learning. Is there in what language you're using for what task or for what
Yeah, of course.
app? And that's something you pick up yourself.
Yeah, and for the platform and for the, especially now in terms of what they call the tech stack, i.e. the frameworks you use for front end and back end, and choosing the best stack for a particular application, and making sure that your application is not going to be obsolete in a year's time. Because the last thing you want to do is put tons of effort into coding something really good, and then a year down the line, half your tech stack disappears, and you've all of a sudden got to rebuild everything from scratch. And obviously these days, cross-platform considerations are a big thing. When I started out, the Mac was popular, but it wasn't sort of encountering the sort of seismic shift that it is now, where huge numbers of people are moving over to the Mac. Just in general.
I think especially on our side of the Atlantic, where maybe Apple wouldn't have been in the 80s, the 90s wouldn't have been as big probably over here as it was in
and
the
even
US.
in the early 2000s, the PC still sort of dominated. And it wasn't really until the iPhone era, and actually probably even really the iPad era, that sort of the general computer user started picking up the Mac. So back then, if you developed a program and you sort of intended to release it, then your sort of main consideration was, well, make it a PC program. Whereas now you start to think more cross-platform, and therefore, you start to develop things with web technologies like Electron, for example, so that your one code base can be cross-platform. Because otherwise you're developing the same app in several different languages to be native to a particular system, and that's a lot to maintain. So
Yeah, I think it's something a lot of companies are probably dealing with as well, is like the advantages of native versus the economics, I suppose.
Absolutely, it all comes down to economics at the end of the day. I mean, I don't think personally there is any argument for cross-platform apps being better than a native app, other than the economics of maintenance and the number of users. I mean, you look at the number of apps that are Electron based now, like Discord, for example, comes to mind, or some
Teams,
Microsoft apps, and Teams and Zoom, and that. Would they be viable? Maybe for a big company, but certainly not smaller companies. It's opened up apps to platforms that probably wouldn't get the apps otherwise.
True.
There's no point in developing for a minority user base, is there, at the end of the day? And I think that's one of the things that kind of stunted the growth of the Mac, was the apps just weren't there. Yeah, and the apps that were there, they were quite poor at times. I'm thinking sort of back to the mid 2000s. The Mac had a lot of great creative apps, and it was always been the sort of platform for creativity. But in terms of your sort of general software, even things like office suites and productivity solutions and things like that, it was always sort of, that was just something you did on a PC.
Yeah, 100%. I'm still a little bit in that world myself, I have to admit, in the sense of, but that's more of an accessibility challenge, I think, than a general one.
Yeah, I think I haven't used a PC in quite a long time, but it swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of conversations, and we have them all the time on AppleVis.com, of Windows versus Mac, and it can get a bit silly sometimes as well. But ultimately, we all use the tool that works for us, I suppose. And
we become familiar with the tool we use. I mean, when I was a PC user, I would have considered myself a power user, if not an expert user, and I was extremely proficient. I could navigate a system at insane speed, and I was really confident, and I struggled when I first started learning the Mac. It was a real challenge, and certainly to move over as a full-time user, which I did in 2014, it was a real undertaking to do that. But now I struggle to use a PC. I don't know my way around Windows 11. I mean, I can get by if I have to, but even simple tasks on a PC now, like browsing the web, I just find it so cumbersome. And it's things like that I would just do naturally on a Mac now.
Yeah, I think that's so important, that kind of muscle memory, and not just familiarity, because you do see a lot of kind of criticism of the Mac in that sense, that it's more cumbersome to use than Windows. But I think often it is just what comes naturally to you, because you're doing it every day.
And it's muscle memory, exactly. That's exactly the term for it.
But I remember there was a conversation not too long ago about whether we could have a third-party screen readers on Mac, and I think that's one of the things that would help us probably on the Mac, but it's difficult. I know you were part of that. You were involved in the conversation along with many others.
Yeah, there is work happening. I know not just the originator of that conversation, but somebody else is currently working on that behind the scenes, or at least sort of the basis of something that has potential. Unfortunately, I don't think the particular project you mentioned is going to go anywhere, but that's another story for another day. But I think it's a difficult one because one of the things that we see in the PC space is fragmentation, and where you end up with sort of 5 pieces of software that do most things well, but no sort of one piece of software that does everything really well. And I think if you have too many solutions, they all become a bit lackluster. That's not to say I wouldn't welcome a replacement for VoiceOver, but it's a difficult one. Is it outweighing the advantages of the tool being part of the system?
Yeah, it's true, and it's funny because I do hear people sometimes sort of say, well, something like JAWS or Windows or even TalkBack on Android, even though it is built in, it's also they update it separately to the operating system.
Yeah.
But I don't think that actually means it gets more updates. I just think you see the updates maybe.
Yeah, and one of the things that I guess one of the arguments I've always had with Apple is if you can't find the bugs and if you can't fix it, then document the APIs and make it open source. Let the community help, or at least give us some kind of plug-in architecture or add-on architecture so that we can sort of improve it ourselves. But it's a difficult one. I don't personally, and this is going to be controversial, but I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. It's not perfect. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not iOS level, but especially on the Mac. But it's usable. I don't have the majority of the sort of. I don't understand the majority of the. It's rubbish. I can't use it. I'm gonna, become a Windows user. This is so awful. Kind of. That's it's just simply not true. I daily a Mac. I spend hours a day on a Mac, and if it wasn't usable, I wouldn't be able to do that.
True. And how is it for coding?
Yeah, it's fine. It's. I think a lot of it depends on the sort of verbosity that you expect as well. I mean, for me as a screen reader user, the less it talks, the better. So, funnily enough, one of the things I encountered in one of the recent apps I'm developing was there were some bugs initially that were preventing VoiceOver from reading certain things when certain verbosity options were switched on. And it made me realise just how verbose some people have their tools. It's crazy to me. But the first thing I do with any VoiceOver configuration is turn off most of the announcements and most of the hints, and so it reads what I want it to at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So for me, coding with it is not a problem because if I command it to tell me something, it will. Whereas I know people sort of like that, high level of output and high level of verbosity, and I guess it's just different use cases, isn't it? But
yeah, I think probably text editing would probably be the main area I think people struggle with, and then depending on how you're coding, that may or may not affect you, maybe, or what programs you're using.
It could be better, but again, even text editing doesn't really bother me that much because I have it silent when I'm typing. I have it. I don't have it read the punctuation out. It's. I don't know. I never have been one to have a very verbose screen reader. And I've just, because of that, I think I've never encountered any of the complaints that other people have. And I guess the only area where it really does bug me is terminal. Just because we don't have the kind of level of control in the terminal that we do with screen readers that are better optimized for a command line. But
Yeah.
apart from that, I don't really have any issues with it. And that's not to say I never encounter any bugs. I encounter voiceover bugs, but they kind of, you get used to them and you find workarounds, and yes, they should be fixed, and yes, it is inexcusable to me that there are bugs that have existed for decades and not been resolved, but part of me feels like that's just the reality of the company we're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose there's a wide range of views out there, but there's definitely, you're not alone. I've seen others kind of feel the same, and it probably, yeah, like you say, it comes down to your own personal usage of the product ultimately. But I know I couldn't use it for my work, but that's because we're a Microsoft house, really, you know what I mean? And it's just not up to scratch. But I use Mac in my kind of personal, for doing podcasts or writing my own blogs or things like that, and it's pretty much fine. So
Yeah.
what kind of, yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the projects you're working on? And there's probably one, that's main one is Simulcast, that's been on the website
Yes.
recently, but there are others, I think, as well. But maybe you can start with that one.
Yeah, so that's the main one. I was a Downcast user. Well, I am technically still a Downcast user. But Downcast hasn't received any updates for a long time. And I was trying a lot of the solutions like Overcast, Pocketcast, etc. And they just didn't have the features I wanted. They didn't have the workflow that I wanted. The cross-device syncing kind of never really worked how I wanted it to. So I would say late last year, I think it was around November last year, I started developing my own client. And initially, I was almost going to do sort of just a clone of Downcast. But then I started thinking to myself, well, if I'm going to develop a podcasting client, let's make it the most fully featured native podcasting client for all Apple platforms. So that encompasses macOS, iOS, tvOS, watchOS, the full works, even Vision OS. And that's kind of what it's grown into, over the time. It's just kind of, there was a lot of sort of feature work at the start, getting the groundwork laid for a ton of features, way more than I could even remember, let alone go into. But yeah, it's sort of laying groundwork, and now we're sort of at the stage where some really great testers are helping me iron out the bugs, and getting ever closer to release. But it's been a really interesting project to work on. I've learned a lot about Swift as I've gone along, and it's almost diving in at the deep end with something quite complex. But no, it's been a really interesting project, and we're sort of at that final stage now of just sort of code hardening and catching the remaining bugs, and hopefully get it in the App Store by the end of the year, which would be nice.
Be brilliant, it would, yeah. I was wondering that actually, is it Swift, and is it all Swift, and what's it been like to learn that?
So it's entirely Swift, and the idea was to keep it as native as possible, but also to use as many relevant Apple APIs as possible. So it's been a real learning curve. I mean, it's my first app working with things like Siri, iCloud, Apple Intelligence, which are obviously which are fairly new. So that's been quite an experience.
And iCloud, notoriously flaky in the past.
iCloud is great fun. Yeah, that one's kind of an ongoing battle. But no, it's not actually my first Swift app. My first Swift app was an app called Levelly, which is a highly accurate spirit level. which was born because I needed a way of leveling my turntable. And I wanted to level my turntable to a degree that was much more accurate than the stock iOS Spirit Level app would allow.
Okay.
So I developed Levelly, and that's not in the App Store yet. I had a lot of issues with Apple's approval process. It was the first time I'd encountered their approval process, which has been an experience. Let's put it that way. And I will say that dealing with Apple as a developer has genuinely been one of the most frustrating experiences I've ever had as a developer. In fact, I would go as far as to say that dealing with Apple is actually harder than writing the apps.
Well, it's not good news. And we've seen other developers talk about their difficulty. I know we had another developer on the site, with a game developer last week, saying it's one of the reasons he's bringing his things to an end. You know what I mean? He's not going to develop games anymore for the platform, which is really sad.
It is sad, and I don't blame him, because it's crazy. I mean, the amount of money they take from the developer, it's a 30% cut on every sale. The complete lack of timely support. If I submit a support request, even if it's not a code level request, even if it's, I'm having an issue with Xcode or something's broken in the website, the response time is like 4 days. Bugs in test flight, there are so many that I've encountered, just not being fixed. So, and the tax forms as well, filling out the tax forms, especially as a UK developer who doesn't have a US tax status.
Of course.
It's crazy, but, and then you've got to get through their approval process. And one of the issues that I've encountered with their approval process is screenshots, because they require certain size screenshots that sort of meet a very specific standard. And unfortunately, a lot of their review, the sort of success or failure of their review process seems to depend on who you end up with, because I've found so many apps in the App Store with screenshots that don't meet their requirements. Yet that was probably the main reason that when I went through the approval process with Levelly, that was the reason that I couldn't finish the approval process. So that's kind of an ongoing thing. I can see why developers are dropping out. And it's also going to be very interesting, because obviously we've got this sort of new wave of AI developers vibe coding their apps now, and a lot of them aren't going to have experience, in terms of getting an app from Xcode into App Store Connect and then sort of through the approval process. So it's going to be interesting to see sort of how they fare and how they get on.
Yeah, and you wonder, or maybe there has been even a ramp up in the number of apps being submitted to Apple, and
almost certainly.
How they're coping with that, maybe not great so far, but hopefully
they're checking them as well.
Yeah.
That's the kind of concern for me, I guess. But I guess we'll see. That again, it's not something we have any influence over, so we just have to sort of keep fighting it and play the system, I guess.
Yeah, ultimately that's true. It's really interesting though, because both the apps you've mentioned so far come from what you mentioned earlier is developing something that you needed yourself. I think often that's where the best ideas come from.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. I know I mentioned to you when we were chatting before an app called Audit that I have started developing, and one of the things I found when I switched to Mac was the lack of a very comfortable to use audio editor for simple single track work. In my Windows days, I was a Goldwave user, and I was extremely proficient in Goldwave. And I've tried all of the options since switching to Mac. I've tried Audacity, I've tried WavePad, I've tried Sound Studio, everything I can find. And I just never managed to find anything for single track audio that was as efficient as Goldwave. So Audit is kind of my answer to that. It's Goldwave modernized and reimagined for macOS. So hopefully that'll be a project for next year to get that one finished and out into the world.
Yeah, that'll be good. And I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who'll be interested. I know anytime there's audio apps mentioned at AppleVis, there's always a good bit of interest in them. So I'd say this will be no different. Yeah, that's cool. And back on Simulcast, actually, you've got kind of podcasting in there, but you've gone. Is that kind of, the fact you've added things like Apple Music, radio, that kind of thing? Is that the kind of thing when you say you looked at Downcast and just thought, actually, what else could I do here?
Yeah, well, I kind of looked at all the podcasting apps and I thought, let's just take the best of all of them and bring them into one native experience. And I think that's the key thing is having a fully native experience, because it's one of the things that really made Downcast a great app. It had a really nice native UI. It was macOS, iOS first. It had iCloud syncing that just worked. It was a genuinely really great app. So yeah, I started with the podcasting apps, and then the internet radio was kind of an accident, but sort of a little bit petty as well. The app was originally called Airwave when I started to develop it, and 5 days before I went to release the first build to test flight, I pushed the build to App Store Connect, and it came up and said that my app name had been taken. And I went onto the App Store and typed in Airwave, and an app called Airwave, which was an internet radio app, had been uploaded just a few days before.
Oh, no.
So I was gutted because I loved that name.
Yeah.
But I downloaded this app and it was very... I don't like to comment on the other developers' work, but it was very poor. I think some AI was involved. It was very difficult to use. Just generally not what I would want in a radio app. So I thought, well, why doesn't Simulcast have internet radio as well? And then it kind of grew as well, because I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do the best implementation of it that I can. So, it kind of grew into a kind of main feature, I guess. Then Apple Music was a bit of an afterthought, but it was a suggestion from a tester. One of the testers reached out and they wanted Shazam song recognition for radio and podcasts. So I started looking into Apple's Shazam kit and integrated that, and then I thought, well, why not have Apple Music support as well, since we're building an Apple native app on Apple platforms. It just kind of made sense.
Yeah, I only very recently realized that it was even possible to integrate Apple Music in any way into third-party apps.
No, I had no idea, because I did look at doing Spotify, because Spotify obviously has their own podcast directory and some exclusive podcasts as well. And likewise Audible and Amazon Music, because Amazon Music provides ad-free podcasts for subscribers. And I think Audible provides exactly the same directory as well. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure they do. And Audible has exclusive podcasts, so I try to implement those as well. But unfortunately, as yet, there are no APIs for either of them. But hopefully, we can perhaps implement them in the future. But certainly, the Apple stuff we can. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, what's that managing the testing kind of side of things? What's that like? Have you been through this kind of level of process before with
I
getting something out
haven't.
there?
No, this is kind of my first time, and it's been interesting. It's been kind of surprising. The number of testers. I think there's something like 400 testers now,
No?
and you really get feedback from a very, very small percentage. You get some testers who probably shouldn't be running beta software
Mm.
because they need a level of technical support that is kind of difficult to manage, shall we say, when you're trying to develop an app at the same time and you're trying to identify real bugs. But I've been really lucky with this one because I've got a few really good testers who are really putting it through its paces and giving me great feedback, and helping me support those people who need it as well. So I can focus my efforts on developing, which has been really useful. And we've had some great conversations, and a lot of the features that have come to the app in recent months are from tester feedback directly. So, it's really important. And the other thing that's super important with testers is everyone has different devices.
Hmm.
Everyone has a different setup. Everyone has a different collection of apps that all interact or conflict or whatever the case may be. So getting that app on as many people's devices as possible makes a huge difference, because an app that works perfectly for me may crash on another person's phone.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's huge. Yeah, and even like you said, you were talking about earlier as well, the different voiceover settings and things like that. That
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
can't possibly test every configuration.
Well, I'll go back to the verbosity thing. I mean, when the tester asked for that, I was kind of surprised, and then I turned it on thinking, oh, I'll just turn it on and it'll just work, and it didn't. And in reality, I'd used Apple's guidance for standard Swift UI interfaces, but it actually required quite a significant re-architect of the UI to make that work. But it's not
Okay.
something I would ever have even thought about,
Yeah,
even as a voiceover user. So, it just shows why it's hugely important.
definitely. And yeah, it's why we talk so much when we're talking even to the bigger companies,
Mm,
getting getting accessibility in on the ground floor and doing your testing with actual users from
yeah.
beginning, all that kind of stuff. It shows it in practice why it's so important.
And different users have different expectations. Some users, they want, for example, one of the big things that's been implemented recently is really comprehensive support for the voiceover rotor.
Mm.
And again, that's something that I don't really use that much. So
This is the actions kind of menu,
the
is it?
actions, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not something I ever really thought about. I mean, I use it a little bit, but I never bother configuring them. It's just one of those things that's there, and sometimes I use it, and often I don't. But I never realised how popular that feature was. So the app's kind of got really comprehensive support for that, with configurable actions for basically every view in the app. But that's just the way that some people work. That they like to use those very specific screen reader features.
Yeah. Yeah, those actions are a great example of that actually, because like you say, some people absolutely wanted it everywhere that it could conceivably be,
Yeah,
essentially, because
yeah, and they have
that's
visual
how they
swipe
interact.
actions, but nothing on that voiceover level. It was
Yeah.
crazy, and there were sort of actions that people would suggest, and I think, well, why would you want that? But at the end of the day, it's an app for everybody, and it's got to be configurable for everybody. And the fact that a feature exists doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of my philosophy: is put as many features in as you need, because at the end of the day, people can always turn it off.
Yeah, and for you, is there any of a balance there to find between complexity and giving people as many options as they want, but not making the UI and the settings and all that kind of stuff over complex? Is that difficult?
I think you do have to be very considered in your approach to UI design. I know Simulcast has a huge amount of settings, and to be honest, even I forget where some of them are. But it's about being logical in how you organise things, and for me, I'm kind of the opinion of, well, if someone really wants a feature and I can implement it, then I will. I will try and make the kind of default setup as lean as it can be. I don't want people to sort of be drowned in features out of the gate. But no, I think versatility is a good thing, and if you can have one app that does everything, then why not? It's less apps you have to use, it's less things you have to learn, it's less different experiences. So
Definitely.
I think there is a balance, but I think if you implement the features well, and if you're sensible about sort of how you handle the UI, then I don't think complexity necessarily is a bad thing either.
Yeah, and like I say, it's having those options can be great, and even organizing them well, but also those little explanations sometimes are different to explain what they are, because you can get lost otherwise.
Exactly, yeah. But then that's all good UI design, and that's all in Apple's UI guidance. Tooltips and subtitles and things like that. It's something that developers often overlook, sadly, but I think you can have the most complex app in the world, but it can still be easy to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you find actually as a developer who isn't using apps visually yourself, doing the kind of the UI side of things?
That, for me, is the one area where I do enlist the help of AI. Not necessarily to write the code, but to sort of give me guidance. The great thing about Swift is the UI is written in code, so it's not like the old Objective-C days where you would use the Xcode interface builder and you would sort of drag your objects around on the interface, and then you would sort of link them all up in code.
Okay.
These days you can write a UI non-visually. One of the things that is kind of my next stage with this app is to head over to somewhere like Reddit, probably, for their podcasting community, which is huge, and find some more testers specifically to give me some feedback on the UI.
Okay.
But Apple's guidance, I mean, their developer documentation, to be fair, is exceptional. They've got a lot of best practices. Their documentation on their UI framework and their sort of code examples are really good. So if you study that, if you're very careful in the way you code, if you think about the devices that people are using and think about how they hold the device and how they interact with their device, then you can just design a passable UI without being able to see it.
It's good to hear. And do you think the same thing as a blind developer, that you think you do better because of it? Is that
Possibly, in the sense that I guess the UIs are sometimes more organized because I tend to group controls naturally and things like that. And I mean, I guess so, but I think it depends how much effort any developer puts into their UI. I can design a terrible UI, and for some of like the quick and dirty apps that I've knocked up just to do sort of a simple thing for myself that are never going to be released, some of them have horrendous UIs, but they work. But
yeah.
you wouldn't want to look at them. So I don't think there's any real benefit necessarily. I think it's just when you can't see the UI, you have to take a lot more care.
Yeah.
But the great thing about developing on Apple platforms as well, and possibly Android as well, although I haven't done Android development in many years. But the great thing is a lot of the UI components and things like standard controls, etc., they're all styled by the system. So yes, you can change the styles, but you can sort of very easily get a UI that's very Apple-like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what a lot of people like is that kind of familiar feel to an app almost across different apps that they're using.
Exactly.
Very good. Um, yes, what's kind of next? What's your next few months looking like?
I think I want to get this app released. I want to get Simulcast out there. I want to get Levelly through the approval process. Just to sort of get a couple of apps in the store by the end of the year. Hopefully there is an Apple TV version of Simulcast coming as well, which hasn't reached any testers yet. So I need to get that out and sort of get the ball rolling on that so I can get it released for V1. But no, it'll be just sort of, getting that out there. This isn't my full-time job, so it's kind of a. I'm not rushing it, but equally, there's testers who thankfully are super excited for it and ready to start using it daily, and some of them even are using it daily now. So, it'd be nice to see it in the store and see it available for everybody. So, yeah, just more testing and then the Apple approval process. So,
That's look forward to.
Hoping to land in the store late November.
Fantastic. And have you thought about kind of things like pricing and that kind of thing yet, or is that for later?
Do you know, it's interesting because I'm against subscriptions. I kind of feel like it's a very sad world when you don't own anything. And I know you don't own apps anyway these days, regardless of whether you pay for them or not. But I was always sort of the opinion that it would be a lifetime purchase. But then some people pointed out that there's no harm in having a subscription and a lifetime purchase. So it'll probably be around the £30 mark for a lifetime purchase, and then maybe $2.99 a month subscription. Levelly will just be a simple one-off purchase, maybe $2.99 or something like that. And then we'll see with the other apps going forward. I mean, it's just a learning thing for me. I've never done this. I've never put an app in the store, so I've got to learn the marketing side of it as well, and learn how to get it out there and get it in front of people. And there will be a 7-day trial. Fortunately, Apple's in-app purchase system allows for that, so
Yeah.
at least I can offer that. And one of the things that I am absolutely set on is you'll buy the app once, or you'll subscribe to the app once, and then you'll get it across all platforms.
Right.
That's a very big thing for me.
So when you buy your Apple glasses in a couple of years, whatever it is,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
your Vision Pro, that's
not at the current prices, but yeah.
yeah. I think we're a while off those ones, and that was all right, realistically.
Yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. It's great that you're able to do that, and that it's not your full-time job. It's not what you're depending on for an income, but it is something that you enjoy doing, and that you can create something not just for yourself, but something that other people will enjoy, and yeah, hopefully you get paid a little bit for it anyway, just for the work you're putting in. So
Exactly. I think the thing is, like, I was going to make it anyway, and this is kind of the way I've always seen it, is I was going to build it, so if I'm going to build it, why don't I let other people use it? And if they like it and they choose to support it financially, then that's amazing and great. And if they don't, then there's plenty of other apps out there, So But like you say, I'm not dependent on it. I'm in that really fortunate position where I can just make stuff I like. So
Yeah, it's an amazing position really to be in, actually, to be able to go, there's no app that for this or this, I don't like this, I'm going to make it myself. So yeah, it's brilliant, and yeah, well done on it.
Thank you.
So yeah, we can wrap up. But is there anywhere where people can follow you or find out more about your work, or get updates, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've ashleycox.co.uk is my main site. I've also got the blindmansworkshop.com, which is kind of more of my other hobbies, woodworking, engineering, that kind of thing. So yeah, check me out there, and I welcome any more testers on this and future apps. So always get in touch. And
Brilliant. We'll link to I know there's a forum post ongoing about the podcast app, so we'll link to that in the description as well.
Brilliant.
And keep enjoying the great sunshine that we're getting in this part of the world for once over the next while. Don't be inside coding too much. Enjoy the sunshine.
Bring on the rain, as far as I'm concerned. It's too hot.
Okay. Well, on that note, I would say thank you very much, Ashley, and enjoyed the chat.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Cheers.
This podcast was brought to you by the community at AppleVis.com. AppleVis, empowering people who are blind, deafblind, or who have low vision to get the most from Apple products and related technologies. A proud member of the Be My Eyes family. For more information, visit our website at www.applevis.com.